You spend more time with your coworkers than almost anyone else.
Mm.
Same schedules, same spaces, same routines. Over time, you stop paying attention to small things, habits that don't make sense, behavior that feels slightly off. In this video, you'll hear 3 scary horror stories about people who seemed normal at first until something at work made them impossible to ignore. If you enjoy horror stories like this, like the video and subscribe.
I have always been a creature of rigid habit. My life is a series of calculated timetables. I wake up at 6, pour my coffee by 6:15, and I am out the door by 7 sharp. I work as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping firm, about 45 miles from my house. It is a long commute, mostly highway driving that numbs the mind, but I never minded the drive. It gave me time to listen to history podcasts and decompress before walking through the front door to my family. That was my routine, and it was sacred to me. Or at least, it was until gas prices started shooting through the roof last year. Suddenly, filling up my truck was eating a quarter of my paycheck, and the financial stress was becoming a tangible weight on my shoulders. That was when Arthur approached me. Arthur worked in fleet maintenance. You know the type of guy I am talking about. He was quiet, kept his head down, and always wore the same gray, grease-stained hoodie, regardless of the weather. We had nodded to each other in the break room for 3 years, but never really spoke beyond a grunt of acknowledgement. One day, he cornered me by the coffee machine while I was stirring sugar into my cup. He had this soft, almost whispery voice that forced you to lean in to hear him. He mentioned he lived just a town over from me and had noticed we drove the exact same route. He suggested we switch off driving. Carpool? Save some money on fuel? I hesitated initially. Arthur was intense. He had these unblinking, watery blue eyes that seemed to stare right through your forehead rather than at your face. But my bank account was hurting, and I needed to be practical. I agreed to give it a trial run. The first week was surprisingly fine. Monday and Tuesday, I drove my truck. Wednesday, it was his turn. He pulled up to my curb in this massive, white cargo van. It looked like it had seen better days, with rust eating around the wheel wells and absolutely no windows on the sides or rear doors. He told me he bought it at a government surplus auction for pennies on the dollar. He patted the dashboard and told me there was plenty of room for his tools. The moment I climbed into the passenger seat, I was hit by a smell. The inside reeked of old fast food wrappers mixed with heavy industrial cleaner. It was a chemical scent, sharp and stinging, like bleach and ammonia. I made a joke about it, asking if he was running a crime scene cleaning service on the side. Arthur did not laugh. He just gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white, and said he liked to keep his environment sterile. That should have been the first red flag, but I ignored it. The drives were awkward. Arthur did not listen to music, and he refused to turn on the radio. He just wanted to talk. But it was not normal conversation about sports or the weather. He asked specific questions, uncomfortably specific. He asked if my wife got home before or after I did. He asked if we had a security system installed. He asked how long it would take for someone to notice if I did not show up for dinner. I brushed it off as him being socially stunted. Some people just do not know how to make small talk. I gave vague answers, checked my phone, and spent most of the ride staring out the window, praying for the miles to tick by faster so I could get out of that van. Friday rolled around. It was late November, and the sky was already pitch black by 5 in the evening. A nasty sleet storm had started pounding the asphalt, turning the roads into slick sheets of black ice. Traffic on the interstate was a parking lot. Brake lights stretched for miles, a river of red in the gloom. We had barely moved a mile in 20 minutes. Arthur was tapping the steering wheel impatiently, a rhythmic, frantic sound. He muttered that this was going to take hours. Then, he turned to me and said he knew a back way. He claimed it cut through the state forest and would shave off 40 minutes. I looked at the GPS on my phone. It showed the highway was deadlocked due to a jackknife tractor trailer. I just wanted to get home. I told him to go for it. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, taking the next exit ramp with aggressive speed. Within 10 minutes, the streetlights vanished. We were on a 2-lane blacktop winding through dense, towering pines. The sleet turned to heavy snow, swirling in the headlights like hypnotic white dust. We were the only vehicle on the road. The isolation was heavy. The only sound was the rhythmic thwack of the wipers and the heater blasting hot, stale air that smelled of dust and that underlying bleach scent. About 5 miles into the deep woods, the van sputtered. The engine gave a horrible grinding noise, like metal chewing on metal, and died completely. The power steering went out, and Arthur wrestled the heavy vehicle to the shoulder. We coasted to a halt, surrounded by absolute darkness. Arthur cursed and said it was the alternator. He popped the hood and grabbed a heavy metal flashlight from the glove box. He asked me to hold the light while he checked the belt. I sighed, zipped up my jacket, and stepped out into the freezing wind. The woods were silent and oppressive. The snow crunched loudly under my boots. I walked to the front of the van and shone the beam into the engine bay. Arthur was leaning over the engine. I watched him reach down, but I realized he was not touching the alternator. He was not touching anything. He was just standing there, staring at the engine block with a blank, focused expression. I asked him if he saw the problem. He slowly turned his head to look at me. The flashlight beam caught his eyes. They looked wild, pupils dilated to black saucers. A weird smile crept up his face, revealing teeth that looked too small for his mouth. He whispered that there was no problem with the engine. My stomach dropped. I asked him what he meant. He told me, with a terrifying calmness, that he had disconnected the fuel pump relay while we were driving. He had installed a toggle switch under the dash for that exact purpose. I took a step back, the cold air suddenly feeling much colder against my skin. I asked him why he would do that. He straightened up and closed the hood with a gentle click. He reached into his hoodie pocket. I expected a weapon, a knife, a gun. Instead, he pulled out a set of keys and dangled them in front of me. He said, the soundproofing in the back was not finished yet, and he needed to make sure no one could hear me scream before he put me inside. He pressed a button on the key fob. The back doors of the van clicked unlocked with a loud mechanical thud. I did not think. I did not ask questions. Pure adrenaline exploded in my veins. I swung the heavy metal flashlight with everything I had. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening crack. Arthur crumbled into the snow, groaning. I did not wait to see if he was unconscious. I turned and sprinted into the tree line. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I scrambled through brambles that tore at my face and clothes, plunging blindly into the dark forest. I did not stop until I saw the headlights of a logging truck on a distant road, maybe 2 miles away. I flagged the trucker down. I was shivering, bleeding, and incoherent. The police found Arthur's van an hour later. He was gone, but they opened the back doors. It was not a work van. The entire cargo area was lined with mattresses and acoustic foam. Bolted to the floor in the center was a heavy dentist's chair with leather restraint straps. And on a tray table next to it, neatly arranged, was a surgical kit containing scalpels, bone saws, and pliers. They found a list in the glove box. It was a schedule. My schedule. It had my departure times, my arrival times, and the dates my wife was out of town. Arthur never came back to work. They never found him. But sometimes, when I am driving alone at night and I see a white cargo van in my rearview mirror, my hands start to shake so bad I have to pull over. I do not carpool anymore.
You know that one guy at work who just refused to grow up? The one who thinks putting a whoopee cushion on the CEO's chair during a board meeting is the absolute height of comedy. That was Miller. Miller was 45 years old, going on 12. We worked the graveyard shift together at a massive distribution center for a major online retailer. If you have never been inside one of these places, it is hard to describe the sheer scale of it. It is a soulless concrete box, just endless aisles of cardboard boxes and conveyor belts stretching out as far as the eye can see. The environment creates a weird, heavy atmosphere at 3 in the morning. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the hum of the ventilation and the occasional groan of the building settling. When you are alone in an aisle, surrounded by millions of dollars of merchandise, you start to hear things that aren't there. To combat the boredom of stacking boxes for 8 hours straight, Miller decided to become the self-proclaimed prank king of the warehouse. It started small and relatively harmless. He would tape the sensor on the bottom of my mouse so it wouldn't work, watching me get frustrated for 10 minutes before bursting out laughing. He would hide behind pallets of dog food and jump out with an air horn when I walked by. It was annoying, sure, and it spiked my blood pressure, but I tolerated it because the job was monotonous. But over the last month, his jokes had taken a darker, weirder turn. He started doing things that weren't just funny. They were disturbing. One night, he put red food dye in the water cooler jug, so when you poured a cup, it looked exactly like fresh blood. Another time, he bought a realistic fake severed hand from a Halloween store and left it spinning on a plate in the break room microwave. When I opened the door to heat up my pasta, I nearly threw up. I told him seriously to knock it off. I told him he was going to give someone a heart attack or get us both fired. He just laughed in my face, his eyes gleaming with a manic energy. He told me I had no sense of humor. Then he winked and said, "You just wait. I'm planning the big one. The Magnus Opus." Last Tuesday, the warehouse was running on a skeleton crew. It was just me, Miller, and the floor supervisor, a nice older guy named Reynolds. Reynolds was strict about quotas, but he was a fair man. He had been writing Miller hard about his productivity lately, threatening to write him up or suspend him if the pranks did not stop. Reynolds was old school. He didn't have time for games. Around 2 in the morning, Reynolds told us he was going to do his rounds in Sector G, the furthest corner of the warehouse where we kept the overflow stock and seasonal items. He walked off into the shadows of the aisles, his clipboard tucked under his arm. He never came back to the break room for our 3:00 lunch. I sat there eating my sandwich across from Miller, who was oddly quiet. I asked him if he had seen the boss, and Miller just shrugged, staring at his phone with a weird smirk. I did not think much of it at the time. The facility is over 1 million square feet. Maybe Reynolds was fixing the jammed belt or doing a spot check on inventory. At 4:30 in the morning, my radio crackled to life. It was Miller. His voice was buzzing with excitement, almost breathless. He told me to come to the loading bay in Sector G immediately because he needed a hand. He specifically told me to bring the tall 12-foot extension ladder. I groaned audibly. I keyed the mic and told him if this was another rubber spider or a bucket of water over a door, I was going to report him to harm myself. He insisted, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He said, "Just come. It's for Reynolds. It's the big one. He's going to flip when he sees this." Against my better judgment, I grabbed the heavy ladder and began the long trudge across the concrete floor. The walk to Sector G took almost 10 minutes. As I got closer, the lighting changed. The overhead bulbs in that section were old and buzzing, casting everything in a flickering, sickly yellow hue. It felt like walking into a different world. When I finally rounded the corner to the loading bay, I saw Miller. He was standing in the middle of the wide aisle, directly under a high steel rafter. He was holding a thick rope that was looped over the beam. On the floor next to him was a figure. It was dressed in our full company uniform, the neon yellow safety vest, the blue work pants, the steel toe boots. It had a burlap sack tied over its head. Miller beamed when he saw me, gesturing proudly to the figure. "Check it out," he said. I made a dummy. I stuffed my spare uniform with packing peanuts and bubble wrap. The plan is to hoist it up so it looks like someone hung themselves. When the day shift crew walks in at 6, they are going to scream their heads off. Reynolds is going to lose his mind. I stared at him, feeling a wave of disgust. This crossed a line. "Miller, that is sick," I said, my voice echoing in the empty bay. "That isn't funny. That's traumatizing. You are absolutely going to get fired for this." He scoffed, rolling his eyes like I was the crazy one. "Oh, lighten up, would you? It's just a joke. But I can't lift it alone. I put sandbags in the legs to give it dead weight so it swings realistically. I need you to help me pull the rope." I wanted to walk away. Every instinct in my body told me to leave him there. But I was tired. I just wanted to go home, and I figured if I helped him get it up, he would shut up and I could go back to my forklift. "Fine," I snapped. "But I am not taking the heat for this when security sees it." I walked over and grabbed the rope behind him. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. We pulled. The figure lifted off the concrete. It was heavy. Surprisingly, shockingly heavy. It didn't feel like packing peanuts or sandbags. It felt dense. It dragged dead weight against the floor before swinging into the air. We hauled it up, foot by foot. As it rose higher, the boots swung near my face. I noticed something specific. The boots were scuffed. They were worn leather, caked with warehouse dust. And on the heel of the left boot, there was a distinct bright orange scrape of paint. I froze. My hands gripped the rope so tight they hurt. I knew those boots. Reynolds had tripped over a pallet jack last week and got that exact orange scrape on his boot. He had complained about ruining his favorite pair for 2 days straight. I looked up at the dummy's hand hanging limp at its side. It was not a glove stuffed with paper. The skin was pale, waxy, and turning a mottled purple color where the blood had pooled. On the ring finger was a gold wedding band. My breath hitched in my throat. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I let go of the rope. The body crashed back to the floor with a wet, heavy, bone-breaking thud that no bag of peanuts would ever make. The impact dislodged the burlap sack slightly. I saw gray hair. I saw the side of Reynolds' face. His eyes were open, glassy, and staring at nothing. His neck was twisted at an impossible angle, the skin bruised dark purple from the rope. "Miller," I whispered, backing away, my heart hammering against my ribs. That's Reynolds." I looked up at Miller. The playful, idiotic look was gone from his face. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was standing perfectly still, holding his end of the rope tight. He looked down at the broken body, then slowly up at me. His face was devoid of emotion. It was cold, calculating, like a shark looking at a seal. "Well," he said, his voice flat and terrifyingly calm. "It was going to be a prank." But he wouldn't stop yelling at me about the quotas. He just kept yelling. So I had to improvise. He dropped the rope and reached into his tool belt. He pulled out a box cutter. He slid the blade out with a menacing mechanical click. He took a step toward me, blocking the main aisle. "Now," he said, "I guess it's going to be a double homicide. Can't leave witnesses, right?" I didn't wait. I threw the ladder at him with everything I had. It clipped his shoulder, causing him to stumble back. I turned and ran. I ran faster than I have ever run in my life. I sprinted through the maze of shelves, my boots slamming against the concrete. I could hear his heavy footsteps pounding behind me. He was fast, and he knew the layout better than I did. He was cutting through side aisles, trying to flank me. I made it to the fire exit on the north wall, but it was chained shut. Miller had prepared for this. He had locked us in. I scrambled away, hiding inside a metal shipping container near the loading docks. I pulled the doors nearly shut and huddled in the darkness for 3 hours. I clutched a heavy tape dispenser as a weapon, shaking uncontrollably. I could hear him out there. He wasn't running anymore. He was walking. And he was whistling, "Pop Goes the Weasel." I could hear his footsteps stop, then start again, getting closer, then fading away. I only survived because the day shift manager arrived early at 6 a.m. and unlocked the front gates. The police found Miller sitting in the break room, calmly eating the sandwich out of Reynolds' lunchbox. When they handcuffed him, he didn't fight. He just told them it was all a social experiment to see how people react to stress. I don't work in warehouses anymore. I work outdoors now in a park service. Open spaces. And I don't do pranks. If someone tries to jump scare me, I don't laugh. I check for the exit.
I have worked in human resources for over 10 years. In that time, I have had to fire over 200 people. It is the ugliest part of the job, but someone has to do it. I have seen every reaction you can imagine. Most people cry. Some scream and throw things. A few threaten to sue the company. But Simon was different. And looking back, his reaction was the one that should have scared me the most. Simon was a data analyst on the 3rd floor. He was brilliant with numbers, but he was socially maladjusted to a severe degree. He had serious hygiene issues, and he muttered to himself constantly while he worked. Complaints started piling up from his coworkers. He was staring at women for uncomfortable lengths of time, stealing food from the break room fridge, and occasionally sleeping under his desk during work hours. Management finally had enough and told me to cut him loose. I called him into my office on a rainy Friday afternoon. I had the security guard, Paul, waiting just outside the door, which is standard procedure for unstable employees. I sat Simon down and gave him the speech. I used all the polite corporate terms like restructuring and not a good culture fit. Simon just sat there. He was a small, wire-thin man with greasy black hair and thick glasses that magnified his eyes. He did not look upset. He did not look angry. He looked relieved. He nodded slowly and told me he understood. He said the office environment was very constraining because there were too many eyes. He signed the separation paperwork without reading it, handed over his ID badge, and shook my hand. His grip was ice cold and wet with sweat. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and looked around my room. He stared up at the ceiling tiles for a few seconds too long, his head cocked to the side like a bird. Then he looked at me and said, "You have a nice office. Very cozy." Then he left. Paul escorted him out of the building, and I watched him walk to his car. I thought that was the end of it. 2 weeks passed. Things started getting weird in the office. It began with the smell. A faint, musky odor began to permeate my room. It wasn't strong at first, just a background scent of unwashed clothes and stale food. I asked the janitors to deep clean the carpets, thinking maybe something had spilled, but the smell lingered. It actually got worse. turning into something sour and animalistic. Then things started moving. I am a very organized person. I would leave my stapler on the right side of the desk, come back from lunch, and it would be on the left. My family photo frame, which always faced my chair, was turned face down. One day, I found a half-eaten apple I had thrown in the trash bin sitting back on my desk with a new jagged bite mark in it. I thought I was losing my mind. I blamed it on stress. I told myself the cleaning crew was moving things, or I was just forgetting where I put stuff. I was gaslighting myself to avoid the feeling that I was being watched. One Tuesday, I stayed late to finish a quarterly report. It was 9 at night. The office was deserted. The cleaning crew had already passed through and gone to the lower floors. The building was dead silent, except for the low rhythmic hum of the Evac system. I was typing away, bathed in the blue light of my monitor, when I heard a soft creak from above. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keys. I looked up. The drop ceiling tiles, you know the ones, the standard white, speckled squares you see in every office building looked normal, except for one. The tile directly above my guest chair was slightly askew, just a fraction of an inch. I stared at it, my heart rate picking up. I dismissed it as the old building settling, or maybe a draft from the air ducts. I went back to typing, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Then, a drop of liquid hit the back of my hand. Plip. I wiped it off. It was clear. I assumed it was water from a leaky pipe. Then another drop hit my paperwork. Plip. I looked at the liquid closely under my desk lamp. It was viscous, sticky, and it did not smell like water. It smelled like saliva. Panic seized me. I slowly pushed my chair back and stood up. I needed to see what was leaking. I climbed onto my desk. Not the smartest move, I know, but I was running on adrenaline. I grabbed a metal ruler to poke the tile back into place. As I stood on the desk, my head was just a few inches from the ceiling. I reached up with the ruler. Suddenly, the tile next to the one I was aiming for lifted up. It didn't fall. Someone lifted it from the inside. A face appeared in the dark square hole. It was Simon, but he didn't look like the Simon I fired. He looked deranged. His hair was matted with gray dust and insulation fibers. His face was streaked with grime and soot. He was pale, gaunt, like a creature that hadn't seen the sun in weeks. He was lying on his stomach in the crawl space, looking down at me. He smiled. His teeth were yellow and coated in something black. "You missed a spot on your report," he whispered, his voice raspy and dry. I fell. I literally fell backwards off my desk, crashing onto the floor and knocking over my chair. I scrambled backward on my hands and feet, screaming his name. "Simon?" "I didn't leave," he hissed, his voice echoing in the plenum space above the tiles. "I live here now. It's better. No eyes up here. I watch you. I watch you all day. You smell nice when you're stressed." A hand shot out from the hole. It was a filthy, claw-like hand with long, jagged fingernails. He began to drag himself out of the ceiling, head first like a birthing spider. He was holding a pair of long, sharp office scissors in his other hand. "I need to make a cut," he giggled, drool dripping from his mouth. Just a little restructuring. I did not wait for him to drop to the floor. I bolted. I ran out of my office, slamming the door behind me. I could hear him land on the floor with a heavy, wet thump. I sprinted to the elevator, jamming the call button 1,000 times, terrified the doors wouldn't close fast enough. I saw the handle of my office door turning slowly. I made it to the lobby and screamed for the night security. We locked ourselves in the guard station and called the police. When they arrived, they brought in a K-9 unit. They found a nest in the ceiling space directly above my office. He had gathered insulation and made a bed. There were candy bar wrappers, empty water bottles he had stolen from the break room at night, and piles of my trash that he had fished out of my bin. And then they found the photos. Dozens of Polaroids tacked to the ductwork. Photos of me working at my desk. Photos of me eating lunch. Photos of me taken from the ceiling vent in the restroom. He had been living up there for 14 days, watching, waiting, listening to every phone call. They never caught him. He knew the building better than anyone. He crawled through the ductwork and escaped onto the roof before the cops could seal the perimeter. He vanished into the city. I quit the next day. I work from home now. I refuse to work in an office building ever again. But sometimes, when I am lying in bed at night, I hear the house settle. I hear a creak in the attic, and I cannot help but stare up at the ceiling, wondering if a tile is about to move. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.